The New South Wales State Emergency Service is urging locals in flood-affected towns to be patient as water levels remain high. Moama on the New South Wales-Victoria border has been at major flood levels since late last week, preventing damage assessment crews from accessing properties. Narrabri is also experiencing major flood levels this morning, with hundreds of residents told to evacuate overnight. We've got reporters Penny Burford in Moama on the Victorian border and Mano Zanguri at Operations Headquarters in Sydney. Penny, first to you, what's the situation like where you are?
Yeah, so here on the border towns of Echuca and Moama, it's been a long slog. The water level has been really high for some days, but there's some light relief at the moment. The rainfall has eased somewhat. We've seen really heavy rains for the past few days, but that slowed down overnight, which came as a huge relief to residents whose properties are being impacted, as that was just additional water they didn't need on top of those river floods, and also to the emergency services who were working in really unfavourable conditions over the past few days. Here on the New South Wales side, they helped 12 people evacuate, many of those in very heavy rain, so they had a much needed break last night with no operations reported when we checked in with them this morning. Over on the Echuca side, they've seen 4 times the average rainfall for October, and across northern Victoria it's anticipated that the record for rainfall in October could be broken. As for the Murray River, as mentioned, it has been very high for several days now. Speaking to the SES this morning, they said there's still about 20 centimetres in it before it does reach a peak, which they're expecting either this afternoon or potentially tomorrow. That'll be over 95 metres. That breaks records held for decades. The 1993 floods, the 1975 floods. This is now higher than both of those, which is putting pressure on those communities. Downstream at Barham, there's also major flooding going on. That could peak, according to the latest SES warning, today at around 6.2 metres. And then further downstream, as it does eventually move down, Swan Hill could see major flooding early next week.
And are there concerns about just how long the water is sitting at that high level?
Yes, so once the peak does hit here at the Murray, at Moama and Echuca, it could stay around for several days. The SES is saying what we've seen with the flooding across the state is the Murray-Darling Basin Authority put out a warning that water quality could be seriously impacted. They're saying things like low oxygen blackwater or blue-green algae are of concern at the moment. They're keeping a close eye on that. From what we can see here in Moama, wildlife are being impacted. Even just this morning on the edge of the river here, we saw several fish dead or gasping for breath, washing up. There's also been really heavy mosquito presence around those stagnant areas, which is potentially of health concern. Wildlife as well being pushed out of their natural habitat. In town, we're seeing things like kangaroos hopping across main intersections, which is very interesting, but also something that motorists should definitely keep an eye out for. And of course, when it comes to those flood waters, people are being reminded do not enter them, as there are several dangers that they could come across.
Yeah, and so this is dragging on and on. How's the community feeling?
Look, pretty exhausted from the people we've spoken to. They've been working since last weekend to prepare this town, filling sandbags, fortifying properties in low-lying areas. You can see behind me the caravan park here at Moama has built a sort of makeshift sandbag wall to keep those water levels back, and the Murray River is now really pushing against it. We've seen people down there every hour or so checking for leaks, pumping water out, reinforcing that. Locals we've spoken to who are on the other side of the levee, of course, as well. They've also just been working around the clock, very little sleep, just to keep that water out. So it is exhausting. The SES has lauded that effort here, however, and they really want to see that further downstream if flooding does occur. They want communities to be as prepared, they're saying, as Moama, which is something that will be really nice for residents to hear. Over at Echuca, they built that levee ahead of the flooding, which is protecting some homes quite well still, but it is causing some controversy for homes on what's being called the wrong side of the levee, those being impacted by the river still who aren't being protected. The council has put out a statement regarding that, in which they said they had no control over where that levee was put, or the decision as to where that levy was put.
Okay, now to report at Manos Nguri in Sydney. Manos, Moree has been suffering some flooding over the last several days. Moree in the north of the state. What's the situation there?
Well, Joe, there were hopes that the water levels in Moree would start receding, but with more rain expected across New South Wales over coming days, this could further impact that area. We've already seen thousands of residents become displaced there. There's been hundreds of homes that have become damaged after the Guida River there peaked on Sunday at levels we haven't seen in 10 years. Now, the SES have said there are still substantial parts of Moree that are subject to evacuate now orders, but they are getting some help from ADF personnel who are helping authorities doing things like supplying food and medication and also door knocking. Now, this situation has also really impacted the crops and agriculture industry in the area. The Deputy Mayor of the Moree Township has said that usually Moree is the most productive agricultural shire in Australia, but the floods have really just devastated the bumper crops. And this is really impacting the community there, which depend really heavily on the agriculture industry. Usually it's if the agriculture industry is doing well, then the township is doing well, but that just doesn't seem to be the case right now. And this issue is not only in Moree. This concern was also echoed by the Emergency Minister, Steph Cook. Here's what she had to say about that a bit earlier.
Our primary industries have experienced just one disaster after another. You know, 4 years ago we were in the grips of the worst drought in 100 years. And you know, I've had the opportunity to view footage from that time, and then, you know, new footage of what it's like with crops coming up and that sense of optimism. And now in recent days, see exactly the same paddock completely underwater, and, you know, that devastation that farming families feel when their, you know, livelihoods are literally washed away.
And Manos, what can you tell us about some other parts of New South Wales?
Close to Moree and the nearby town of Narrabri, there's still major flooding happening there. There were some residents that were evacuated from that area last night. Some people were also evacuated from the lower North Lismore area as the water there nears moderate flooding levels. Closer to Sydney, there is a minor flood warning in place for communities along the Hawkesbury Nepean and Georges River. But of course, SES is warning people against complacency. They're saying that it may seem like the situation is calming down, but the risk is very much still there.
We've heard that the weather at the moment is receding a bit and the rivers are slowly receding, but it doesn't take away the risk of the communities and the roads, the water across the roads, across a vast area of our state. So the risk hasn't gone for those people travelling around the state.
In the past 24 hours, the SES have received more than 650 calls for help, and they've also conducted 32 flood rescues. We also had that confirmation yesterday that a body was found in floodwaters in New South Wales as well. Now, we keep up to date with these numbers quite frequently, and 32 flood rescues is quite significant. It's more than we've seen in the past couple of days and even in the past week or two. So the SES is quite concerned about this. Again, they're really urging people not to drive through floodwaters. This is putting them, their passengers, and the people that have to come and rescue them at risk. They're saying you may be familiar with the area and the roads, but the conditions do really change when flooding is involved.
Okay, Manos Nguri there in Sydney and Penny Burford in Moama on the Victoria-New South Wales border.